We have an amazing panel here to discuss our net zero journey and the critical role financial service institutions play in that. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves as we get into the discussion, but first, as Gary mentioned, my name is Brandon Sutcliffe. I lead sustainability for financial services for EY in the Americas. And you know, as we was thinking about, we were preparing for this panel, we all know there are a lot of challenges when it comes to measuring and monitoring the net zero commitments that have been established on a global basis, and even more specifically here in Canada and the commitments that you have towards net zero for 2050, and even your programs that you've established around the net zero challenge for the private sector. So part of what we'd like to explore today during the session is how can financial services firms really help to overcome some of those challenges. So with that, maybe Amar, I'll start with you. How can financial services firms ensure that their own climate targets are accurate and achievable given some of the data and availability challenges that we face?
Well, thanks, Brandon. First, introduce myself. I'm Addas, Senior Director of Sustainable Finance at FCC. I'll take 20 seconds to talk about FCC because my guess is most people in the room have no idea who's FCC. FCC is Farm Credit Canada. It's a Crown corporation, $50+ billion balance sheet, mostly in loans to the ag and agribusiness, agri-food sector. So that means essentially, you know, as they say, farm to fork, right? So everything in the value chain of farming, most in loans, but also we have a private venture capital arm, and we've recently made our first direct equity investment. So FCC has been around for over 6 decades, and we're really innovating. And so I've been at FCC since April as part of a new strategy that embeds sustainability at the core of the organization that touches all the teams and all the functions at FCC. And so we're trying to figure out exactly those types of challenges. And I think it starts with recognizing that, you know, we're kind of post that excitement that initially started when everyone and their cousin was setting a net zero target, right? And all the CEOs went, you know, on TV or in the news and said, we're setting a net zero target. And then the next question, probably in private, was, you know, how do we do it, right? How do we get there? So the challenge is, in order to set a target, you have to know where you are today, right? What is the baseline? And for us at FCC, obviously, the vast majority of our emissions are financed emissions, right? That's no secret. Our operational emissions are minuscule compared to how much emissions are in financed emissions. So we have to figure out the baseline, and figuring out the baseline is much harder than you might think, right? There are standards out there that most financial institutions use, and those standards are not necessarily ideal for the Canadian sector in particular. They're not granular enough for agriculture. So the solution is to figure out other ways that can give you more confidence in your baseline. I think we're going to be talking about that a bit later on. But you know, broadly speaking, it's coming up with a way to develop factors, because it's all economic activity, right? Like how much does, you know, if you have X emissions per chicken, per cow, right, per grain farm, et cetera. So coming up with something that works for Canada, that is actually representative of the Canadian sector. And you know, something that most people don't know is that regenerative agricultural practices are actually quite common in Canada. No-till agriculture is a standard practice for a large majority of farmers in grain, for example. So starting at that point and really customizing it for Canada, and then of course figuring out how do you get the data, right? Because for FCC we have tens of thousands of customers, the vast majority of which are family farms, right? Their day starts early before sunrise and ends after sunset. How can you ask those customers to collect data and you know, provide it to you? So we have a tool that's called Ag Expert that helps us with that, and we're looking to expand on it. It's basically, think of it as QuickBooks for the farm, and it's the easy way to describe it. And so that's one thing we're looking to leverage, but you know, it doesn't cover all the customers. So starting point.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's, the response rate's not going to happen overnight. As you said, they've got other things that are top priority for them. But that's good to hear that you've started that journey and collecting the data directly for them, because where else are you going to get the data really in that sector? Yeah. So maybe I'll turn to you, Nancy. Any thoughts around pretty much the same topic around data quality and availability, and how you're overcoming some of those challenges?
Well, thank you for actually, because I brought you a glass of water, I told you that I wouldn't answer the question first. I really appreciate it. That being said, see how you set yourself up for success, right? Here you are. So my name is Nancy Goudreau. I'm the managing director and head of sustainable financing at Desjardins. For those that don't know Desjardins, we're a credit union. We're the biggest in Canada, one of the biggest in North America. We're going to be actually celebrating our 125th year next year, so we're really excited. And we were founded basically on ESG principles, basically making sure that everybody has access to financial services. So it's really ingrained in our DNA to be in that direction. And I would say it was pretty aligned with what Amar said. The reality is that data quality is a challenge. And obviously my portfolio is a little bit more widespread than agriculture, although we do have a strong agriculture portfolio. What's interesting, though, is that for me, it's also the mindset that I'm working on. So data quality, engaging our clients, getting somewhere. Our sustainable financing team is not part of the bureau, a Sustainable Development Bureau. We're not under the CSO. We're really in the enterprise business banking division. We are there to support a client doing that transition. So our mindset is really a mindset where, and I'm sorry, I brought my iPad compared to my very esteemed colleague that don't have one, not because I have a memory problem, but because usually I talk too much. So I will try to stick to what I've got.
I have mine because I have a memory problem.
Okay, perfect. Okay, back to topics. I would say that not only have we have similar challenge, how do you calculate that the actual, I would say recipes that are provided are not perfect for the financial institution, and 80% and up of our who we are is basically emission, financed emissions. So basically all of our clients. It's also to try to bite-size it. So target industries. Instead of going for everything. At the end of the day, we want everything done, but we just can't. The size is just too big. The other thing is to try also to understand which action as a lever. So you can set a target, but if you don't know how you're going to actually, or where your leverage is going to be to actually act on that target, you're going to miss it. There's no reason you won't. And the other thing is also, yes, work on improving data quality, but end of the story, data quality doesn't reside only at our institution level, it resides at our clients' level. So we need to be there to support them. Hence the reason why our team is there, the sustainable financing team. And finally, we need to be ready to adapt and be agile. The reality is most likely the first target we're going to set, we're going to have quite a challenge to actually achieve it because we think we know where we're starting. I'm not sure we're there yet.
Wonderful. That's great. So I guess I've heard from both of you, establish baseline emissions first, do it at a sectoral level, hard to abate sectors probably first, and then you can set your targets and you can start to measure and monitor against them. And we can talk a little bit more about how we're going to go about doing that. But maybe I'll turn to you first, Holly, and just get a sense from you after a quick introduction, please. What are some of the key challenges that RBC is facing as it relates to the alignment of the net zero targets for Canada and how you might be addressing them?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Holly Henningwood. I am from RBC, and I just recently started a new role at RBC that is stakeholder engagement within the climate strategy team. I'm very pleased to be here today. So RBC will, the challenges we face are the challenges our clients face, as already has been highlighted. The Scope 3 emissions that we have are all our financed emissions, and our clients' success will drive our success. And so we are very much of the view that engagement, I think Sarah spoke about our engagement this morning in terms of some of the frameworks that we've established for our highest emitting sectors. That same concept has to roll out across the bank. We've done our initial measurement of financed emissions, and we know where our highest exposures are. And so we know the work that needs to be done, but how to do it is always the big challenge. And I think in terms of challenges that our clients are facing that we're very aware of in trying to travel this journey with them or travel this path towards decarbonization, any kind of patchwork approach to policy or regulation is really a challenge for all our clients and for us. Polarization of the environment as it relates to climate issues is also a big challenge, particularly south of the border, but we want to try to avoid that to the extent we can here. And then any other sort of influences that discourage disclosure. Disclosure is a huge piece of how we both understand the risks and opportunities in our book and also measure our progress, and we use it as a tool to engage with clients as well. And so we're very interested in seeing as much sort of pro-disclosure movement as things move forward as we can to try to support our clients to do the work to understand their own emissions and then help us to understand them. And then where we can lean in from there is to support them and try to encourage them to decarbonize.
That's great. Thank you, Holly. And so I would imagine that partnership, collaboration plays a fairly big role when it comes to trying to overcome some of these things. So I'm going to dive maybe back into sort of the data and availability and ask the question about some of the collaboration partnerships that you might be having with across the industry.
Yeah,
So,
that's a very timely question. We have a call tomorrow, Nancy and I, with other partners because FCC and Desjardins are actually together leading collaboration with financial institutions in order to really align on three things. One, we kind of touched on already, which is how do we all agree on how to measure emissions? There's no benefit in each institution approaching the measurement part in a different way, right? So the challenge is so huge that you really need to align on that starting point. How can we all agree on how to measure emissions? For us, obviously, in the agriculture sector, Desjardins also has a big book in ag. RBC is part of this engagement, and really all the big banks, all the Canadian banks, and a number of smaller institutions and credit unions and so on. So we're co-leading this process. The second is, okay, once you've aligned on measurement, how do you align on target setting and pathways that actually work for Canada, right? What are the credible pathways for emission reductions? And at the same time, keeping in mind something which is very critical, which is food security, right? We all need to eat, and that's not just in Canada, but globally. And it's very likely that as climate change manifests itself and you see more examples, unfortunately, of physical damage and physical manifestation of climate change, which we're all seeing already, the benefits will not be even, right? They're going to be spread, and some countries will be hit more than others. On balance, it's likely that Canada will benefit in longer growing seasons with warmer temperature. Of course, the flip side of that is more drought and more wildfires and so on. But we have to think globally. How can, and this is something our CEO has been consistently vocal about, which is we have a generational opportunity for the Canadian ag sector to lead in sustainable food security globally, right? So that means likely we will need to increase production, but at the same time look for ways to reduce emissions. And so that's the second pillar of that collaboration that we're having with the banks, which is how do we align on those emission pathways? And it's not something we're going to just kind of invent, but there's a lot of work that's been done. There's the flag commodity pathway that SBTI has done, which we're using as a source of inspiration, but Canadianizing in a way what works for Canada and what works for the Canadian ag sector. And that's very broad, of course, right? Because you have beef, you have poultry, you have dairy, and it varies across the country. And then the third pillar of that is mobilizing, right? So once you've measured, once you've set targets, and it may or may not be a net zero target, because in agriculture the reality is it's a hard to abate sector, right? So you have to really think about decarbonization and not get sort of fixated on net zero, because the reality is those industries will continue to be with us for many years to come, and we have to find ways to support them to achieve decarbonization without making it impossible. So the third part is the mobilization, right? Which is how do we use the tools at our disposal? And today, throughout the day, there have been references to sustainable finance frameworks. So FCC has developed a sustainable finance framework as well, obviously with a focus on agriculture. And it's in the process of now being rolled out and implemented, and driven by science, informed by impactful metrics, and what are the eligible activities where we can really make a difference. So that's kind of the ambitious part of this collaboration as well, is how do we all align on maybe taking some of the sustainable finance frameworks that are not specifically focused on ag from other financial institutions, and see if we can agree on ways to make it a bit more granular, and agree what are those eligible activities that can help us get some wins to reduce emissions and really prepare the sector to compete globally, right? At the end of the day, this is not about FCC or the banks or the government. It's about the reality of the global marketplace, right? And random example I'll mention, few weeks ago, Denmark set a tax on cows, right? This is unprecedented. Every cow will cost 100 euros now that will have to be paid to the Danish government. That's new. Never seen that before. Obviously, there are methane emissions. Should that increase and be adopted at a wider scale by the European Union? That's a factor, right? That means any agribusiness, agri-food that is exporting to the EU could potentially face that as the EU rolls out its own carbon border adjustment mechanism. So being aware of these issues is going to be important.
Oh, certainly, and I had not heard that yet. That's amazing. Nancy, any thoughts on the collaboration? Maybe either about agriculture sector in particular, or maybe going beyond that a little bit.
I'll go beyond, because I think you've described very well how we are partnering together in order to support the agriculture. But like I mentioned a little bit earlier, our portfolio is a little bit wider than that. End of the story, everything that is working on getting on a pathway to the net zero, no matter who you are as an organization, especially a financial institution, you're not an island. Your client at the end of this is going to do business with many different actors, be it another financial institution, being a Crown Corp, being an alternative financing. And if you don't think of it that way, at the end of the day, you're missing the point. Finance emission is a sport thing, so you need to be together. So yes, we're doing this for the agricultural sector. We also have partnered and worked on the work group with BDC on finding how we're going to help SMEs to start evaluating the GHG emission. Might not be perfect, but it's a starting point. We also work with the Circular Economy Leadership Canada in order to say, okay, what's the taxonomy for circular economy? Do we understand all the same thing? Are we talking about the same thing? Are we evaluating the same thing? So, when you're talking about calculating, it's a formula. But at the end of the day, there's judgment there. You have to put hypothesis forward. You need to have people that are going to judge. What are you putting in there? And if you think you're going to be the only one with the answer, you're wrong. So that's why partnership is so important on any pathways, working with other banks, other financial institutions, Crown Corp, to actually align. Because at the end of this, if you look at your line of sight, it's the client, the business that is there. And that business cannot have 3 financial institutions, 3 support partners that will come in different ways. And if in the financial institution level we align, it's going to be easier also for the government to have the same view, to measure the same thing. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Nobody's going to have an answer. Are we going to have the right number? Who cares? At the end of the day, at least we have the same number. We evaluate it the same way. So this is basically what I'm trying to and it's part also of who Desjardins is, a credit union. By definition, we want to cooperate. We see the value on being together. And I think for a net zero in that industry, this is critical.
That's great. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind as I'm listening to you talk about the collaboration and partnership is, you probably have a lot of similar or the same clients, right? When you're going after this data and information that's hard to find, that you can't get through publicly disclosed information, have you started to talk about how you might be able to go to that one client once and then share that information across the multiple financial institutions that are part of this partnership or collaboration?
Well, the thing is that we, at Desjardins, we have exchanged what we call the questionnaires. What type of question? And strangely, or maybe not surprisingly to many of you, the same question, not written the same way, ask for the same answers. And for the poor person that is at the end of this, it's just like, what the hell am I being asked for? And they don't have any idea. So yes, we need to align on this. You know, what are we asking? How are we asking that question? And what is the information we're looking for? The idea is that if you want to improve on data quality, data accessibility, you cannot ask the business to work on different data points in different ways to present it. They need to be aligned to say, okay, when you have a financial, a financial balance sheet, everybody knows what goes in there, right? Everybody knows the topics. They know where it is, what it means, what should go there. Is there judgment? Yes, of course, the accounting will have some judgment. We need to get there also for everything that is the data that will relate to finance and mission.
Great. Holly, as we were thinking about some of the new approaches, what do you think is sort of crucial on a going forward basis to really have an effective climate engagement strategy in financial services?
So I guess I'll take it up a level to sort of 3,000 or 10,000 feet or whatever. I think the creation of the position that I've just started is sort of recognition that stakeholder engagement is really critical for financial institutions in both going out and learning as much as we can in this space, talking to stakeholders across the spectrum, and then also communicating our position clearly and convening and collaborating wherever we can. So I'm just on the beginning of this journey, but I think that's our objective, is that we should be creating conversation wherever we can, and as I said, learning as much as possible, and then trying to use that as momentum to make progress with our clients and in the space generally.
Maybe I'll just open that up to others.
Sure, I can jump in. So I think the starting point for us is that we have a mandate to support the industry, and we can only go as far as the industry will go. And we have to remember that, at the end of the day, those are businesses that are there to make money, and in many cases, even just to break even and keep going, right? As in terms of their business. So we have to try to focus on what works for the industry, right? And what can we achieve without overburdening the customer and encouraging them, to adopt these beneficial practices. So one of the ways that we're looking to engage with customers is, and this is again something we've heard through surveys and feedback. Why are you not recognizing some of the sustainability activities or beneficial practices that I have adopted already? Right? So we're thinking, okay, we have to start by recognizing and rewarding, in a way, some of those activities. So we've created for the Sustainable Finance Framework a tiered system, right? So we have 3 tiers, or maybe possibly more, but 3 for now, so that somebody that has already adopted beneficial practices can get rewarded through a suite of incentives, right? So, without getting into too much detail, but those incentives will include financial and non-financial solutions. So that's step 1, right? Tiered system whereby, okay, if you've already adopted some practices, you can start here, and in order to get to this level, here's what you can do, and here's what we're prepared to offer you in terms of, again, that non-financial aspect of it is super important. Nancy and I were talking about this earlier, which is the resources are simply not there for them to be aware even of incentive programs that exist that they could take advantage of. And this was brought up earlier in one of the other panels, right, on the tax credit and tax incentives. Right, so how can we support the customer to first of all, create awareness of those incentive programs, and then to navigate the red tape and the process of actually getting there, and then potentially even matching some of those incentives ourselves, which we have a number of programs at FCC that incentivize adoption of BMPs. So it's really being there to have a conversation. And for us, we're very close to the customer by definition, right? So often our frontline people, the relationship managers, they're not just there to sell a financial product. They have a personal relationship with the customer. They're advisors. They're friends in many cases. They advise on succession because a lot of those are family farms, right? So it's a personal, family issues come into play as well on succession and so on. So it's really developing that close relationship with the customer that's important, and then that allows you and gives you credibility and allows you to have these conversations that may sometimes be a bit awkward.
Thank you. Nancy, any further thoughts on that?
Well, I'm wondering if I should talk because I already talked a lot, but I just will bring two things. On the Desjardins front, to align with what you were saying a little bit earlier, Sue, is that reality-wise, you do realize that my stakeholder and my client is also my owner, right? It's interesting, huh? Credit union, the person that you actually provide service for is also the one that owns you. Think of it. So when I'm asking something, or when I'm doing something, when I'm imposing something, they're also the ones that are believing in me, that are bringing their assets to me. So it's interesting when you try to engage that way. It's a different perspective. And to Amira's point, the thing is that no matter what you want them to do, if you give them tools that they cannot use, they just won't do it. So no matter the grants, no matter the program you put out there, if it's not actionable for the businesses, they just won't move. So when you talk about stakeholders and actually moving things, you have to think of how am I going to make it that it works.
No, that's a great point, and I like the owner aspect of it from your particular perspective. But do I have time for one more question? 2 minutes. Okay. So maybe I'll get final thoughts from all three of you, but maybe one last final question. We heard from some regulators today, or regulatory bodies, some guidance. So, a lot of change, regulatory change, policy change. What sort of proactive steps are you taking to get ahead of that change as you're trying to meet these net zero goals? And maybe I'll start with you, Holly.
I don't think we're really in a position where we're trying to anticipate where regulation is going to go. I think that's difficult. Instead, we're trying to really focus in on our beliefs and the idea of transitioning with your clients and what is the best way. I mean, people have been speaking about the complexities of the different sectors that we're dealing with, the different clients and their business models, and it's a huge challenge to try to just get to a business model that integrates climate into your conversations, and I think that's where we're focusing. That's how we see the best way to go forward, irrespective of where the regulation goes, and then we deal with the regulation.
Uh-huh.
Got it. Any thoughts or final thoughts? Actually?
Yeah, I'll try to go quickly. Try.
Okay.
Focus on try. I would say you need to be agile. The reality is that it's not going to slow. The regulation are just going to accelerate, and it's going to come in many, many directions. Most of your clients will not always be able to actually follow through. So if we want to be a good partner, we need to be the one to be ahead of the game. So being in contact with those regulators so that we know what they're thinking before it's actually becoming a law or regulation is probably going to be one of the things that we can and are able to do in order to support better.
I'll give you the last
word.
Last word.
First and last? All
Yeah.
Right. So we're a crown corporation, so we can't really weigh in on regulation. But the best thing that we can do for customers is to prepare them for what's out there. And not just when it comes to Canadian regulations, because, they will have to, the banks have OSFI B15, they will have to report on their own exposure, and so they will be asking clients for their exposure. We are not a deposit-taking institution, so every FCC customer is also a customer of another financial institution. So to make them aware of Canadian regulations, but also global regulations that may indirectly impact them, right? If they're customers, those exporters of agri-food products to European Union, to California, to other jurisdictions, are subject to disclosure requirements. So it's the best thing we can do is to help prepare our customers for complying to what their own customers will be asking them for.
Okay. I think I'm going to end it there. I'm told that I have to end it there by the looks of it. But thank you all for coming. And if everyone could give a big round of applause for our panelists.